Hi everyone, FIDE Master Dennis Montecruz is here, and today I thought I would take a look at a game played quite a while ago, back in 1976, but I think it's an excellent game for a number of reasons. I mean, one is, as you'll see, it's really just a beautiful game. For a long time it was a pretty famous one, although nowadays, I mean, enough water has gone under the bridge that probably most of my audience will be unfamiliar with it. It's also a very good game for illustrating some themes in a particular variation of the French defense, and I would say, broadly speaking, it shows some very important French defense themes. So let's take a look at this, and I think you'll find it quite interesting and instructive. So the game is Reshevsky against Raphael Viganian, played in Skopje in 1976, as I mentioned. And at this point, Viganian was a youngster. He was, well, not a kid, but he was in his mid-20s, while Reshevsky was still quite a seasoned veteran at this point, in his mid-60s, but still very, very strong. Okay, so we've got the French, Satirish defense, and then the line with knight to f6. So e5, knight f to d7. Now, the most popular variation nowadays, and I don't know if it was back then, but certainly it was known back then, was bishop to d3, c5, c3, knight c6, and then knight to e2. So a somewhat more modest approach. White doesn't try to grab every single possible square in the center with one of his pawns, but is content with the advantage in space that he's got at the moment, and simply wants to finish developing his pieces, get to a safe position, and take it from there. But there's also this very ambitious line with f4, and it's still playable. I mean, it still could be played, but it is a very dangerous line, to be sure. Okay, c5, c3, knight c6, and the problem here, well, okay, a slight problem. I mean, White would love to play, let's say, well, let me put it this way. White would love, ideally, to develop all of his minor pieces in some kind of ideal way, but he really can't. This bishop on c1 is locked in. If he plays knight e2 with the idea of then playing knight f3, well, this bishop on f1 gets locked in. So that's the advantage of playing bishop to d3 a few moves ago, is that White at least gets to put his minor pieces so that way they're not stepping on each other's toes. So this knight will come to e2. Okay, let me give a few more moves here. And from here, okay, Black plays cd, cd, and then f6. And here f4 is not very good. There's an old trap. F takes e5, f takes e5, and then knight takes d4 with the point that on knight takes d4, queen h4 check, and then queen takes on d4. So White can't quite get every single little thing that he wants in the game. So he can get his minor pieces to develop in a nice and happy way where they don't step on each other's toes, or he can play f4 safely, but he can't do both. So from here in this line, the main move is e takes f6. Knight takes f6, castles, bishop to d6, knight f3, and so on. Okay, and then here Black has three main moves, but we're not going to get into that theory. Alright, so back to f4. So c5, c3, knight c6, knight d to f3 is the move that White chose. So again, he's got to make some concession somewhere. This lets both of his bishops stay alive for the moment, and White is hoping that he can play bishop to d3 and then knight to e2 and get everything that he wants. But we'll see that this involves concessions as well. So here, Black played the move queen to a5, and one point of this is that it's trying to take advantage of a pin on this diagonal. So that way, if bishop to d3, well, Black can take, and White can't recapture because of that pin. So there are a couple of moves, at least, that can be played here. The move that Reshevsky chose was king to f2. But bishop to e3, I think, is more popular nowadays, and White seems to have done pretty well. So I was looking up games with high-rated players after bishop to e3, and in these games with at least one and often two high-rated players, White has done very well. Now there's a game between Istratescu against Del Rio Angeles, played in Capella Legrand in 1998, where Black played f6. Usually Black played c takes d4, but in this game Black played f6, And I think this is an okay move. White went on to win that game, but well later, 49 moves. So f6 I think is worth consideration. So c takes d4 is the main move though, and then knight takes d4, knight d4, bishop d4, and here, at least in games with high-rated players, black has tried at least 3 moves here. In a game between Horesic and Costin, so Costin is a well-known British GM who lives in France as well. He played knight to b8, and after knight f3, okay, he played bishop d7, bishop to d3, and white was only a 23-55 player. I mean, certainly not a bad player, but definitely lower rated than Costin, who's a grandmaster. Went on to win in only about 31 moves. So, and here I'd say white is a little bit better. So that was played in a 1998 tournament. Knight to c6 was played in a game between Dragan Solak and Kosirov, both well over 2,500, a couple of GMs. Played in an internet tournament in 2002, and white went on to win a very long game after bishop e3, bishop d7, bishop to d3. And again here, though, I think white is probably a little bit better. Okay, another move here instead of knight to b8 is b6. And this was tried in a game between Nigel Short and Born Gesser, played in Solingen in 1986, and Short won very quickly. And he definitely outrated his opponent, but the problem is after b6, black has just cut off his queen. So a4 takes advantage of this, and it's just not a good idea. The general idea is a logical one. Black wants to play bishop a6, swap off the light squared bishops, put a rook on c8, and so on, but tactics comes first. Finally, queen of c8 was played by the highest rated player involved in any of these games. This was played by Zhang Pengzhang in Liverpool 2007 against David Howell. And Howell won with white in this one too. Bishop to d3, knight c5, bishop c2, a5, knight f3, bishop e7, queen e2. And I would say this position is actually equal, but Howell managed to grind him out in a very long game, 83 moves. So, generally speaking, white has done pretty well with bishop to e3. I don't know if it promises an advantage, but in many of the games, white has gained an advantage, and white has certainly been successful. Well, Reshevsky played king to f2, and this is not such an unusual idea. In fact, this kind of king walkabout is still pretty standard today. And the point of this is that white wants to maintain a pawn on d4 rather than a piece. So he gets out of the pin, and he's hoping that he can just play g3 and king g2 and simply sidestep all of the dangers with his king being a little bit exposed. All right, so here black played bishop to e7. b5 can also be played, going for queenside play, but Viganian tried a different plan. And here, I think white should have played g3, again with the idea of shuttling the king over to g2. Instead, Reshevsky played bishop to d3, which isn't maybe a big error yet, but it was, I think, more important for him to get his king out of the way quickly. Now, there was a later game between the great German grandmaster Hübner, Robert Hübner, and Dutch GM Hans Rey, played in Weichensee in 1982, so 6 years after this game. So Hübner repeated this, and Rey did not did not follow in Viganian's footsteps, but played instead c takes d4, c takes d4, and f6. And in this game too,